I'm going to start, first of all, with the announcement that, of course, next Thursday, which is Tiny Esther, we're not going to be having any class here. I thought last week there might be one or two people who are coming, but I don't believe now. I was given this note to remind you that it is Tiny Esther, and therefore we're not having classes. And between you and me, I'm very happy not to see you, but because it'll be a day after my surgery. I'm having a cataract surgery on Wednesday. And so in case I don't know how I'm going to feel or anything, and thank you very much, because I have to read the Megillah and have the face next, so I said I can read it with one eye. I don't know, but anyway, there's no classes next Thursday. Last week there was as I told you just before, there was a request that perhaps I should say something about Purim. And even though our theme has always been trailblazing through the text of the Tanakh, where we take sometimes very well-known stories, sometimes not that very well-known stories, but things in the Tanakh that we often know a lot about, but then to go through the text and say, well, gee, I didn't realize that about the text, or, oh, I knew what Chazal said about this, but it doesn't say that here in the text. And it's a lot of fun just to open up and to then see a different view, basically what we call the simple pshat. What is the Torah telling us? That's what we've been doing. One could therefore argue that Purim is not in the Torah. I mean, it's in the Tanakh, because we have Megillah Esther, and it's not, however, on the same, I should say, we are going starting from Bereshit, and we're now in Shemot, and Megillah Esther is one of the last things ever written in Tanakh. But I think that because Purim is coming, I will spend a little bit of time to see some of what Chazal actually see in the roots of this celebration, the marking of, the marking of the day of Purim, and what meaning it has. And here too, we're going to see textually what it says in the text and what it's trying to tell us, and what maybe we can find some of these secrets about, and the mysteries about Purim. Now I'm going to start not so much with Purim, but with what one can say as the precedent to Purim. And you know this because you hear it all the time. I may not necessarily say, yeah, okay, we know that, but we know why, but not that deeply. And that is the story of Amalek. I think that's going to be the maftir for this coming Shabbat Zachor. We in Yerushalayim have really a unique opportunity, because it's Purim Mishulash, which means that we will be reading the Haftorah of Shabbat Zachor, which is the story of Amalek and the war of Shaul, the first king, against Amalek. And then next week, which is Purim Mishulash, actually, because this is the Shabbat before Purim, that's why it's Zachor. And next week, we're going to be having here in Yerushalayim the Haftorah that we read this week. It's the one time, only time, uniquely, and only in Yerushalayim, that we're going to say the same Haftorah 2 weeks in a row. So in case you miss it this Shabbos, you'll find it next Shabbos. All right, at any rate, I'm going to start with Amalek, and we generally know why we think of Amalek when we think about Purim, because the enemy of the Jews in the time of Purim was, of course, Haman. Haman was named in the Megillah as Haman HaAgagi. Now, there aren't many nations that we know in Tanakh that were called the Agagi. The only thing we have, or any connection we have to Agagi, the Agagite, was the fact that the last king of Amalek was a man by the name of Agag. Hence, Chazal say that's the connection. And we could shrug our shoulders and say, okay, that's a nice connection. Oh, isn't that nice? And he was also bad, and he was bad. But there's a far deeper connection between the two, more than just the word, the name itself. And that's what I want to touch upon in this class. Okay? The story of the war or of the attack of the Amalekites, the Amaleki, in the Torah is found at the very end of the parsha of Bishalach. Vayavo Amalek vayilafchem im Yisrael b'Refidim. And we're going to look at that whole issue and then use that to also find something very interesting about Purim and the sin, or better yet, the whole issue about Haman and Purim. Okay? The Torah tells us the following. You probably know all about this. And by the way, I do also apologize for not bringing you any sources, even though I had sources, I couldn't run them off on time. I had sent the sources for next year, to him. It's run off, as you saw already. But by the time I had decided to make this into the Purim thing, I couldn't get the sources done. There's an interesting statement in the Gemara. The Gemara asks a strange question. It says, Haman min ha-Torah minayin. Where do we find a source of Haman in the Torah? Source of Haman in the Torah. It's about 1,000 years later that this whole story happened, more than that, actually. So what does it mean that, where can we find the Haman in the Torah? So the Gemara in Chulin asks this question. And obviously we don't have to take that literally. It doesn't mean it's Haman in the Torah. But what it is where do you find a Haman-like activity, a Haman-like acts, Haman-like personality? Where do we find that in the Torah? So they respond with a very interesting pasuk. The verse from Bereshit, where after the first man, Adam, ate from the tree, and the God asks, Hamin ha'etz asher tziviticha l'bilti achol achalta? Oh, Adam, says God to him, did you eat from the very tree that I told you not to eat from? And the first word of that question is Hamin. Did you, from the tree, from the tree did you eat? So, how smart are Chazal. Hamin, hey, mem, nun, that's Haman, terrific. Between you and me, if I was going to ask, where do I find Haman in the Torah, I have much better things. I mean, after all, we have a wonderful thing in the Parsha Shalach itself. When we speak about the manna, and they ask, and they call and there it's called Haman, the manna. And that is not Hamin, that's Haman. Hey, that's even a closer connection. Chazal don't do that, because that's not what they're looking for, of course. They're talking about a behavioral thing. What was the question when he asks Haman? He asks the first human, Adam, Hamin ha'es, did you eat from the tree? The question is simple. I may have said this before, but hopefully, like myself, probably forgot. But I'll remind you, because I didn't forget this story. Because I used to repeat it to my students all the time. God told the first human beings, "Mikol eitz hagan achol tochel." You can eat and have anything and everything. The whole Garden of Eden is yours. It's not only a Garden of Eden, it's a garden of eating. You can eat everything here. Everything is yours, except for this tree, these two trees. It's a Chaim, right? It's a Dadat Tovara. Then that you can't eat. What does the first man do? What does Haman do? I'm sorry, I'm not the Haman again. What does Adam do? Butter. What happens? What does Adam do? God says you can have everything except for that. And what does Adam say? Fine, but I want that. It's a phenomenal, phenomenal story of humanity. That's what people do. You can have everything except, well, I want the except. I used to call it the Tootsie Roll problem. When I was teaching kids, before everything, every candy had hashgacha, Nestle's finally got, and the Hershey's got. And I used to say to my students, you don't know how fortunate you are. In my days, that wasn't true. But you do have now all of this. You have this and this and that. And invariably, every year, one, if not more than one, of the students said, but what about Tootsie Rolls? Didn't have the hashgacha yet. You have everything, but you didn't have the Tootsie Rolls. And that's what you see. That's the story of Adam. It's a story of humanity. It's a story of wanting what you were told you're not to do. Parents often say, don't tell them that you want him to do that. Tell them you better not do that. That's how you know the kid's going to do it. And what about Haman? Haman had everything. Everybody's bowing down to him. Why is he miserable? Because one guy didn't. Because Mordechai lo yichrav lo yishtachaveh. He won't bow down. That's the end of it. He had everything he needed, everything he wanted. He could simply see this Jew and say, and go on. No. He's going to get him. I want what I don't have. And that's exactly what Chazal are saying. Hamin ha'etz hazeh. Same thing that Adam did. He had everything. But the one thing he wasn't allowed to have and couldn't have, that's what he wanted. That's behavioral. And that's something that's fairly common. But if it lets you destroy and ruin your life, because the one thing I didn't get, I don't have, and I'm angry, and you change as Haman did, everything, he's going to make plans and plots. He's going to get Mordechai. He'll kill all of the people, but he's going to get him. When that ruins you, you are, after all, the second most powerful person in the largest, at the time, empire that there is. Not enough, because Mordechai isn't bowing down to me. Chazal see that. They said, this is what the story is. And so, this idea of Haman and of Adam runs in the story of Purim. But I said I'm going to ask about Amalek, because that is, after all, how we started. What was the sin of Amalek? And this is where we get to the text. That you have to understand the story of Amalek. After all, God says, Ki macho emche et zecher Amalek mitachar hashamayim. He said, Zachor, you Jews better remember this. Because remember, Ki macho emche, I'm going to destroy them. I'm going to wipe them out. We had a lot of people who hated Jews. We collect quite a number of people who do that. We're doing beautifully today now. We're getting more and more who hate us. We're never told that we have to wipe out the Egyptians who enslaved us for hundreds of years. We're never told that we have to wipe out the Romans or the Greeks or whoever it was who oppressed the Jewish nation for many years. No. But this one stupid little band of almost, how would I call them? Barely a nation. The Amalekites were primarily people who attacked in different places. I can go show a place in the end of in Perek Lamed Aleph in Shmuel Aleph. You see the Amalekim come and they attack a city whose soldiers were gone, and only women and children were there, and they attacked them and kidnapped them. No, I'm not talking about October 7th. I'm talking about what happened in Shmuel Aleph by the Amaleki. That's who they were. They picked the weak people, they attacked them. That's who they were. Wonderful. That's who God said, sorry, we're going to destroy him. And then not only me, God says, but Timche et Zecher Amalek. That's what we say in Zachor. That's an obligation of the Jewish nation, Timche et Zecher Amalek. So what happened that was so terrible? Let's see the text. And again, I'm sorry, I don't have the source sheets, but I promise you, I'm not lying about this. Okay? Vayavo Amalek vayilachem Yisrael b'Refidim. That's how we get it. And by the way, you're going to read this on Purim also, let alone on the Shabbos after that. It was after Israel had left Mitzrayim. They had gone into the desert, had some trouble with how much water they needed and food. And finally, they got the manna, the man, and fine. And they're on their way from Refidim. Okay? Refidim was where they had camped. The next stop was going to be this place called Sinai, Har Sinai, or Har Elohim it was called. That was going to be the next stop. So they camped in Refidim. And then we read, Vayilachem em Yisrael be'Refidim. Amalek comes and attacks Israel there at Refidim. And that's when God says, that's when he says, remember what happened, because I'm going to destroy the very memory of Amalek. Moshe sets up a Mizbeach, and then God's Kiyad al Keska, for God's hand is on his throne, which is it's a oath. God is making an oath that Milchama Lashem Ba'amalek, there will be a constant, a ongoing battle of God against Amalek, midor, from one generation to the other. Now, I'm not going to go into the thing, you have to wipe out and never forget Amalek. We say that, and then God says, I'll always have a fight against Amalek. Something else we'll deal with, but not now. Why? If you look, Amalek attacks Bnei Yisrael in Refidim, where they had camped. And we rightfully assume that the attack was directed against the nation of Israel there. But look in the text once again. That's not quite what happened. Not when it's this story is told in Sefer Dvarim. And there at the end of Ki Tetzei, we read, and this is the maftir we'll be having this Shabbat, that God says, Asher korcha baderech, that Amalek attacked you while you were traveling. Right? And they targeted all those people who didn't keep up with the rest of everybody else, the weak people. You were weary and you were thirsty. I hear ayef and ayagea does not mean tired and tired, but often the term ayef means to be thirsty. You were thirsty when you travel in the desert, and you were tired. And that's when They attacked. That's what got very angry. The fact is that the people of Israel weren't in Rephidim. They weren't camped. What had happened here, when you look, is only the Necheshalim Acharecha. It was the people, the nation had started their trip to Har Sinai. What's going to happen in Har Sinai? We all know that. They're about to receive the Torah. So they come to they start moving, but there are some people, and we read that also, another source. It says, Vayis'u b'nei Yisrael, they call Adat b'nei Yisrael. They all got up and they started Purim, mimid basin l'masehem, api Hashem, vayachanu b'Rephidim. They entered the area, the wilderness of Sin. That's not Sinai, but it's very close there, right? They go to Rephidim and there's no water. And there was no water, and that's where Moshe is given the instruction to hit the rock as he's supposed to, which he did. And we told the following. After they complained they had no water, where read says, Vayom Hashem Moshe avor lifnei ha'am. You may stand in front of all of the people and take the leadership of the nation as well, and take the staff that you have, that staff of miracles with you. God says, I will be standing there, I will be present there on the big rock, B'chorev, at Chorev. Does anyone know what Chorev is? Another name for Chorev? Chorev, yes. No. Mount Sinai. Har Elokim Choreva. Chorev is another name for Har Sinai. God says, I know they're in Rephidim, and I know that they're thirsty. I'll be at Chorev, which is where they were going anyway, at Har Sinai, and you'll see there a rock. V'hikita batzur, you will strike that rock, and Yetzu Maim, and then water will come out, and they'll be able to have water for the people and for their flocks as well. That was it. Bnei Israel were camped at Rephidim. So God says, oh, you're thirsty at Rephidim. I'm going to be in Har Sinai. I'll have a rock. You can give it water there. Kadosh Baruch Hu, you couldn't get any, there was no makolet, something nearby. You got some bottles of water. You're telling them you're in Rephidim and you're crying and you're thirsty. More than that, to understand what this is, you have children there. Children are crying. They need water. What does God say? Yeah, I'll be there. I'll give you water at Har Sinai. Strange. There's a reason for that. Okay? So they start to go to Har Sinai. And they start marching there. That's a solution that's going to happen. What happens when the bulk of the people start marching to Har Sinai, where eventually they're going to get the Torah and they're going to get the laws, but to get the water, they go there. Vayavo Amalek. Amalek comes. Vayilachem im Yisrael. They started fighting with Israel. Where? Not on the derech, Rephidim. Who's left in Rephidim if the whole people walked out? The old people, the little children, the stragglers, the weak, the sick. That's who they saw. The strong people, the men, soldiers maybe, were running to get the water. They'll bring it back to the people. They get it first, help them, whatever. And who do they attack? The weak. The weak. That's what they do. Ramban plays very carefully. He says that you realize. He says that Hinei hutzrach Moshe lekadem lefnei ha'am la'amod mei Rephidim l'chorev. Moshe had to get up and he had to leave Rephidim where the people were. He had to go to Chorev. That's what he's told to strike the rock. That's what he's going to do. And that's what the majority, certainly the leadership, and certainly the men and the strong people were going. Left behind were only the weak. And that's when that great, wonderful, wonderful, courageous people, the Amalek comes, oh good, we got kids there, we can kill them, we can kidnap them, we can murder them. Hey, that is Amalek. That is Amalek, and I'm not going to go into it, as tempting as it is, with what happened today, with these years, and why people are correctly saying that the most clear reflection of Amalek is just a couple of miles away. No question about that. Tempting, but I'm not going to do that. But that's what Amalek. Why does God want to destroy a poor little nation? Nothing to do with almost Bedouins. They just sort of attack me. What type of people go and attack the weak, the children, the sickly, the elderly? What kind of sickness is that? It's an evil that God could not allow to exist in this world. That's why he says, and it's your job. Because you, Israel, have to bring morality to the world. That's what the Torah is about. That's why I'm taking you to Har Sinai. They were going to Har Sinai to learn the moral code, and what happens to it? The most immoral people attack you. Said, God, we can't deal with that. They're gone. And the proof of this, by the way, and I was saying this, they come to Har Sinai, but good is it if the people are thirsty also back in Rephidim. Because we read there, and this is in Dvarim yet, when he came to Har Chorev and Har Sinai, he did strike that rock. And then we are told the following, the waters, it says here, he said, when they were at Har Sinai, they had sinned with the golden calf, which we'll get to also. It says, I took the dust of the golden calf that Moshe had destroyed after it was been worshipped. And I threw it into the stream that was coming down from Har Sinai. What stream was coming down from Har Sinai? Moshe hit the strike, and Vayetzu Mayim Rabim, and the waters came down, and these waters were made there. As long as Israel was there, that was the water that they were able to drink. So the water happened. That's all I'm just trying to think. That is what happened. And this is what's happening with Amalek and who attacks. Now, the Jews of Persia at the time, the Jews of Persia were also baderech. They were also on a tour, not tour, they were walking. They were on their way. On their way to where? Well, if you think about this, this really is a time. The Chazal talk about when did it happen? Oh, the Beit HaMikdash had not yet been built. Oh, the Beit HaMikdash has been built. Historians think clearly that it was the beginning of the building of the second temple when this happens. Either way, it was the first king of Persia, Cyrus the Great, Koresh, that textually, you see this both in Ezra and you see it in even in Divrei Hayamim, different places, that Cyrus the Great opened the gates for the Jews after he conquered and took over Babylonia. And he said all Jews are granted to go back to their Yerushalayim, to their land, to their city, and to build the temple to their God. That's what he says. I almost couldn't believe it, but that's what he did. That's what he said. Opened up the leash to that Aliyah. But the Jews are Jews. This is about maybe actually less than 50 years after Churban Bayit. I know what they say. Chazal say 7 years. It wasn't. It was actually, the destruction was 586 BCE. Cyrus comes to power about 539, 538 BCE. It's not even 50 days later. And that's why we read in Ezra that the people who are now older, but they were young men. They were 15, 16, 20 years old when they saw the first temple destroyed. And then they came back. They cried because they said, compared to what was in the first temple, what we're building now for the second temple isn't much. But they were alive. It wasn't that many years. And 50 years, 48 years have gone by. Cyrus the Great says, everybody come back. All you Jews, you can go to Jerusalem and build your temple. He even gave guards who helped them go and who helped them on their way to Yerushalayim to protect them. This is what he did, Koresh. About 5% of the Jews went. Very small amount. Come on, they had backyards with pools in Babylonia. What are they going to get in Yerushalayim? Jews stayed primarily in Bavel. Very few returned. Although, when they returned under the leadership of Zerubbabel, who was the great-grandson of the last king of Yehuda, nonetheless, that's Tzkiyahu, it was much more than when Ezra came, and everybody says, oh, Ezra brought them all back. Ezra brought back about, I think, 1,500 people. About, what did we have? 150,000 people came with Zerubbabel. Anyway, they were on their way. They were on the way, if not quickly, but slowly, from Persia to Yerushalayim. They were going not from Refidim to Har Sinai, but they were going back to God, where God's presence and the holy place for them, right? And just as they're happening, along comes this guy called Haman. And what does he do? He attacks these people that are not a big, wealthy, but weak, innocent civilian population. In effect, Amalek comes to life again. That's what Purim was about. That's one important thing about Amalek. But there's another crucial thing about the Amalek and Purim connection. Okay?
Well, what's the first one?
What I said the last half hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Put them out of balance.
Huh?
Put them out of balance.
But the first connection was Amalek attacked the Jews during a crucial time of their history when they're about to go to Har Sinai, about to return to get the Torah in effect. And they only attacks the weak people. Here you have the Persian Jews who are starting a slow but nonetheless ongoing aliyah to Yerushalayim, helping to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash. They just started to build it there. And along comes this Haman who attacks that weaker community, Jewish community in Persia. That was the connection there. And when that happened, and again, I'm going to do my best not to get editorial here. But God says, what happens is that now, Moshe says to the people, Vayoma Moshe el Yehoshua, they're attacked. Moshe tells Yehoshua, get back to Refidim. He says, V'tzehi lachem ba'amalek, and go and fight against Amalek. I'm sure that Yehoshua was in the kollel and he was sitting and learning, but Moshe still told him he had to go to the army, and he did. And he gathered an army. It was a crucial thing and part of a very important educational thing for the people of Israel. Remember, from the time that they knew God in Egypt, they sat there and said, all right, that's one plague, 2, 9, 10, what do we do now? Okay, walk here. It's water, it's wet. Okay, I'll split the water for you. Okay, we'll walk through it. Everything was what God did miraculously. You wanted water? I'll hit a rock. I'll find it in a tree. You need more. You're hungry? I'll get you man. You had an attack? Well, you know what? Time for you to do something. When the Egyptians ran after the Jews as they were leaving, before they reached, or just when they did reach, the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds, and they started crying, what are we going to do? And God said to him, and Moshe said to him, don't worry, Hashem yilachem lachem. God's going to fight for you. Va'atem tacharishun. You remain silent. God will take care of it. Now they're getting hit by another enemy. Not much long after, a couple of months, maybe a month and a half afterwards, when they're being attacked. They're being attacked. Actually, they last a week and a half of Iyar. They got out in the middle of Nisan. We're talking about maybe 5-6 weeks later, right? And what does he say? He doesn't say, don't worry, I'll fight for you. He says, get an army and start fighting. You have to do something. When people are going, and at the time there, it was before the sin of the Meraglim, the spies, the idea was that we're going to go from Har Sinai straight into the land of Israel. And God's trying to teach them, I ain't going to do this stuff when you get there. You're going to have to fight. You're going to have to actually work the land. You're going to have to make it. You're going to have to make your own economy. You're going to have to do it. You're a regular people. The life of miracles is over, more or less, the open miracles. Now it's time for you to become a regular person. You have to do for yourself. The first step of that was here. Go and fight Amalek. I'm not going to do it for you. Oh, I'll do little miracles. He probably didn't say, Moshe keeps his hands up and God sees to it that they defeat. No question that God's behind the defeat, but you don't see that. I mean, hello, existence of the state of Israel? There was fighting. Believe me, there were miracles there with no logic that Israel should have survived, have anything, right? So we didn't see it. But, enough people were raising their arms and God responded to it. But there had to be your involvement. Okay? That's what's so important. Okay? So that was a very important message to give this community that was going there also. When you look at the story of Purim, by the way, what did God do? How many times do we find God's name in Megillah? 0. Did God do anything for them? When did things start to get okay? When did it flip a little bit? When the story started, when Esther said, we got to do something. When Mordechai told Esther, you've got to do this and this. And Esther calls for everybody to fast. And then they start davening and they all start doing, and they get together. You have to understand the whole story of Purim was not that, oh, goody, all the enemies were destroyed by the Jews. There was one thing Achashverosh did for the Jews. He said, okay, I will let you defend yourself. That's what he said. He never said, I'm not going to let them try and kill the Jews. He said, I'll let you defend yourself. And so the Jews gathered into battalions and they fought and they were able to defend themselves because they did something. It isn't that it was done for them. That was essential, especially for that time. Likewise with the building of the second temple and so on and so forth. That concept that Jews had to fight was not only at Amalek, but also against the Amalek in the time of Haman. You had to fight. It wasn't just a matter of saying, let it go, God will help us. Not true, not true. And finally, we had to go to the next fight with Amalek when King Saul was given the directive by the Navi, the prophet Shmuel. And Shmuel said, I was reading the newspaper last night and God came to me and told me something. What did God say to Shmuel? He said, it's time for now you to destroy Amalek. I said, I'm going to destroy it. And I told you, you're going to destroy him. It's time. The first king finally, for the first time since the time of Joshua, remember, has now gathered an army. There was never an army of Israel until that time. Please understand that. There were fights and battles constantly throughout Sefer Shoftim, 350 years. But there was never an army. There was a battalion. There was a battalion of this tribe of Binyamin, a tribe of this, and some of them got together to fight. But never could they get and organize one army. Shaul did that. Shaul does it in Shaul Aleph in Perek, I think it's Yud. When one small border city of Israel was threatened by a king, and he gathered 300,000 from men from Israel and 50,000 plus from Yehuda, and they got an army. So you got an army now, God says to Shmuel. You tell Shaul now, get rid of Amalek. Get rid of him. And he does that, and you know the whole story. But when God says you have to get rid of it, all of them. Everything. Just destroy them. Because I can't allow this evil to continue. I can't allow this immorality to be part of my world. And you've got to get rid of that. Now, any culture that has a culture of we have to kill children, we have to kill and kidnap people, civilians, we have to let them kill our kids, but we should be able to kidnap them. This is not a culture that can be allowed to survive. So he says, Shaul, you do that. And Shaul does that, basically. Except he was tempted by a lot of the finest sheep, and I think it was good. I'll give it to as a wonderful prize for my soldiers, and the king, the head of all of the evil, Agag, who had to be one of the first ones to be killed. He actually does not kill him. He leaves him as is. What is so terrible? There it is. What does Shaul do? This is a terrible battle. It's a battle that, as moral people say, how can you have a battle to kill everybody? It's a terrible thing. You feel bad. You can't do that as any human being. Only God can tell you to do that. Only God has the right to say, yes, you have to destroy them. It is a milchama lashem ba'amalek. It's God's battle against Amalek. So this is God's battle, Shaul, that you are carrying out at his command. What does he do? Most of it right. But when he takes the booty and the spoils, he's now saying what? He's saying that which I'm sure all of you heard, because this is a very, very well-known senator, a man by the name of William Marcy. And you remember 1828 was a good year. In 1828, in the United States, there was a senator by William Marcy, and he said a very simple expression that explains what happens. He said what you said, and that is, to the victor belong the spoils. If Shaul takes the spoils, he is saying that I am the victor. And God could not allow that. If you are the victor, then you are a murderer. Because you can't wipe out a whole nation. Only I can. And you're telling me you're the one who's the victor? That's why God gets so angry. And that's why he gives him a very serious punishment. Because that kind of thing cannot be allowed. And that is what it's all about. Even if I'm not going to do it now, but comparing Shaul and his punishment, David, his successor, David, had a lot of wars. But he's also a man who basically composed Tehillim, a book of praises of God. He who thanked God for everything. Shaul, at the end of the victory over the Amalekites, goes and he's put up a monument. Not to God, though. Monument to his victory. David always saw God as behind his victories. So what happens? Amalek had not been properly destroyed by Shaul. God says, okay, I'll give you another chance. Haman and Purim. And what happens now, he said, it's not going to be easy. There's going to be a time of hastarat panim, as we say, Esther hastarat panim. It won't be clear that I'm going to be helping you. You and I look back at the story and we know it had to be that way. But he said, you have to destroy. You have to now destroy the Amalek of this time. And therefore, they are successful. But do we say Hallel to thank God? Do we say Hallel on Purim? No. Because God purposely wanted to say, I want you to understand that you had to do this. Not me. And what does Ushla, and if you look in the Megillah, and this is essential to understand fully. Not once, but 3 times in the Megillah, it says that, well, first of all, the king says, all Jews can go and protect themselves, ushalalam lavos, and you can take the spoils. And not once, not twice, I believe it's 3 times. You know what it says? That the Jews came and they defeated them. But they never touched the spoils. Why didn't they touch the spoils? Because they learned that what Shaul did was wrong. We can't take the spoils because we recognize, even though it was Hastarat Panim and didn't see God, that this is God's victory, not ours. And the spoils don't belong to us because we are not the victor. That's a story of Purim and of Amalek. Ushlalam, uvabiza lo shalchu et yadam. It took centuries. But the sin of Saul was actually finally straightened out, as it were. They would not benefit from the spoils of the war and their victory. They recognized who the real victor was, and that he is there at all times, even when you can't see him, even when he's not splitting seas, he's not making water come out of rocks. God is there. And that is the message, really, of Purim. To recognize that even at a time when you don't think he's around, Kadosh Baruch Hu is there. He is watching over us. We see it, and I will get political now. We see it in the very establishment of this state of Israel after almost 2,000 years. Okay, I'm sorry, 1,870 years. We see that. We don't see hands coming down. We don't see lightning bolts from heaven. But we do see things that shouldn't that somehow happen because we got involved. Because, yes, we have our army. And we have beepers that explode. Don't know how. We have things happening that you couldn't imagine happening. Because Kadosh Baruch Hu is there for us. And that's really essential to understand with Purim. Always remember who the real victor is, even when you think it's you. It's wonderful to have what we have as an IDF and an IAF, the Air Force. It's just unbelievable. But ultimately, its success is because we recognize that Kadosh Baruch Hu is behind it. And we have to thank him for that. And yes, we do have to say the Tefillah L'Shlom Hamdina. And we do have to thank Mishberach. And we have to thank God. Because not to do so is to deny God's involvement. And how it is that sometimes even most religious people don't think they should do that. Why should the most religious people be blind to miracles? Because they can't see him. That's painful. That's Purim. That's what we have to learn now as well. Okay? So in 2 weeks, Emir Hashem, we'll start talking about the splitting of the sea and that story, which makes absolutely no sense. But we'll see that when we look at the text.